Hi, everyone. Welcome to Waste 360's Nothing Wasted podcast. On every episode, we invite the most interesting people in waste, recycling, and organics to sit down with us and chat candidly about their thoughts, their work, this unique industry, and so much more. So thanks for listening and enjoy this episode.
All right, well, welcome to Rising Leaders Talking Trash. I am Zach Martin, Vice President of Sales for Big Truck Rental. And we have a great group of panelists today here on the virtual screen that all have been awarded the prestigious 40 Under 40 Award this year in 2020. The goal of this session for you, the audience, is to provide some insight into a career in the waste and recycling industry, as well as to get the perspective from these rising stars on some key topics that are impacting the industry not only today, but into the future. In addition to highlighting the 40 Under 40, did want to take a quick minute to talk a little bit about the FILA group. FILA is the Future Industry Leaders Alliance that is a part of the National Waste and Recycling Association. This group is made up of about 80 members across the U.S. and Canada of folks that have been identified by up-and-coming leaders within their organization. It's a great opportunity to network and get access to some awesome professional development throughout the year. So if you have interest, we'd like to encourage you to learn more about the group, apply to the group. You can do that in the resource section of this webinar, as well as check out more details on the 40 Under 40 group in that same section. With that, on the panel today, we actually have a FILA member and Josh Mann from Waste Management. We're going to go around the horn, have each one of you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit how you got started in the waste industry. So Josh, you want to kick us off?
Sure. Thanks, Zach. Great to be here today. Certainly, just glad that we can all get together and enjoy Waste Expo virtually this year. But my name is Josh Mann. I'm the Public Sector Solutions Manager for Waste Management. It's kind of a fancy way of saying I design and implement and manage municipal collection programs here in Southern California. And got about 120,000 individual customers spread over 3 counties. It's exciting business here in Southern California. I come to the industry actually rather recently. My background is in economic development. I spent a lot of years assisting communities with attracting and retaining businesses, primarily small and medium-sized businesses to their communities. Worked a little on tax incentives, and really just had a chance of a lifetime lunch with a friend of mine, and she said, I got a career opportunity for you, and here I am 5 years later. So great.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Josh. Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. So my name is Alexandria Coari. I am the Director of Capital and Innovation at REFED. REFED is a national nonprofit that works to accelerate solutions to food waste specifically. In terms of how I got started in the waste industry, my background actually is in investment banking. I had a handful of years also working on fair trade certification, specifically in the fresh produce industry. And then the last few years of my career, I've worked in the startup acceleration space. About 2.5 years ago when I joined REFED, prior to that, I was actually living between Mexico and Chile. And as I was coming back to the States and looking for my next opportunity, I was thinking about the words of a recruiter that at one point had asked me, given my eclectic background here, what I was trying to do with my life. Did I want to make money or did I want to make an impact? And honestly, in that moment, I realized 2 things. One, me and him probably weren't going to get along very well. But 2, that was a really pivotal point in my career where I think, given my personal aspirations, passions for wanting to make a difference in the world, I just vehemently rejected that notion that you had to be able to choose between making money, making a career, and having an impact on the world. So when I first started learning about REFED, it was really intriguing to me because the organization itself tries to motivate and mobilize the entire food system towards actions that fight food waste. And it's a fantastic example of how you can both make money, and I'm not talking about on a personal level, of course, but food waste is just good for business. It helps save money for consumers. I know Turner will talk a little bit about that too. But then also it just has a great impact both on a social level and an environmental level. So decided, like I said, 2.5 years ago, to kind of marry this finance background, food supply chain development and innovation experience at ReFed.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Alex. That's a great story. Turner, how about you?
Alex, I resonate with that so hard. Just avoid choice at all costs. That's just my life motto. And thanks, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name's Turner Wyatt. I'm the CEO of the Upcycled Food Association. We're a nonprofit industry association with a mission of reducing food waste by growing the upcycled food economy. And I got my start in this whole world in the food rescue space. So collecting food that would otherwise go to waste from distributors, wholesalers, that sort of thing, and delivering it to low-income families in my hometown of Denver, Colorado. And got interested in upcycled food via a couple of realizations. Anyone who's ever worked in food rescue will tell you there's just a lot of stuff that you can't use or that you have a total overabundance of. But just because you can't redistribute it doesn't mean it doesn't have value. And so, for example, bread, like the most overproduced thing out there, we started doing things like brewing it into into beer, selling the beer to local restaurants and making money to support our general operations as a nonprofit. Realized, boy, you can make a lot of money this way. That really does a better job of realizing the value of all this extra bread that we have versus just composting it. So then kind of through that journey and meeting more people and exploring that idea more, it turns out that the entire food waste movement can be more consumer based and therefore more economically sustainable, more scalable. And that's how I wound up in my current role as CEO of the Upcycled Food Association.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Turner. Well, with that, guys, let's get started. And Turner, I'll come back to you as you've gotten into this business and now the CEO of this organization. Have there been any mentors that you could talk about, and how did they maybe help you excel in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think important to note, coming from the food rescue space, I worked for an organization called Denver Food Rescue. I served as the executive director there for about 7 years, and we had this philosophy that it's not a philosophy, it's just a reckoning with reality that low-income communities and communities of color are the ones that are most impacted, disproportionately so, by environmental problems, including food waste, and will have the pay the most when the effects of climate change come around and start impacting our communities around the world. And so therefore they deserve to have the greatest agency and control over creating solutions. And so we created a board of directors that was entirely driven by members of the community who we were partnering alongside to redistribute this food. It was a pretty radical thing. I still to this day have not heard of a single other nonprofit board that was entirely resident-led, as we termed it. And I am entirely convinced that most of the success that we had as an organization was directly related to the fact that we had this really strong ethic of resident leadership being deferential to those with lived experience of the problem that we're seeking to solve. So that's kind of like my context, how I come into this. At my current role, I think that same philosophy has taken hold within the upcycled world as well. This association was created to solve the problems that upcycled food businesses experience and to streamline the industry and promote the industry and get more consumers exposed to upcycled food so that they can vote with their dollars to participate in the reduction of food waste every time they visit a grocery store. And okay, if we're trying to solve problems, the people with the best knowledge of the problems are the ones with lived experience, so the companies themselves. And so the board of directors at Upcycled Food Association similarly is made up of our member businesses, who are everyone from pre-launch startups all the way up to publicly traded businesses who are engaged in upcycling food, realizing the value in food that slips through the cracks and elevating it to its highest and best use. So that's kind of my, who's been a great mentor for me, is just being deferential to those with the most lived experience over the years.
Awesome. Alex, you talked about kind of an aha moment, in your career and making a choice. Are there any mentors that you could share with the group that have helped you grow in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from my perspective, some of the best mentors that I've had, over the course of my career, I would say have been other women that have been surrounding me and have kind of shown me unique paths to kind of work on problems that really I think are going to make an impact on the world. Those women, kind of some of the things that I've learned from them are, one, to always be curious and ask questions. So to your exact point, Zach, of, when people present you with a choice, and to your point, Turner, questioning that choice, and does it really need to be a choice? And I know particularly for women, there has been historically a sense that, we need to be making a choice in terms of career versus other things in our lives. And so to find strong mentors that are kind of having that lived experience, at least for me, and understand how to manage life and work, ask those questions, challenge norms, to me has been really powerful and has driven me to where I am right now, where I'm, having a fantastic ride on this roller coaster that is food waste and fighting food waste. And we've done so many great things over the last couple of years with Refed. And I'm really grateful for those mentors that have kind of challenged me to keep asking questions, be curious, and really try to uncover opportunities in areas where people might be undervaluing. And I can't think of an industry that's more undervalued than food waste. So yeah, I'm very grateful for them.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. And Josh, what about you? You made the change from economic development into the waste and recycling space. Any mentors stand out to you over the course of your career?
Yeah, certainly. I think of my kind of two folks in my leadership team. Doug Corcoran, who is entering his third decade in the industry, really shows the breadth of what you can do. He talked about that he started out as the assistant to a trash picker at a landfill, and now he oversees our entire public sector group for all of Southern California. So just showing the upward mobility and the breadth of what's available within the industry. And then Sandra Pursley, who I work with, she's another transplant. She came out of the home building industry. And just really been exciting to work with her. She's got just a great mindset about how communities work, and I find myself privileged to be able to work with some really incredible people. So,
yeah. Awesome. I think that's one of the best things about our industry is that we've got this group of veterans that are willing to spend the time with folks just like you. And help give you guidance and thoughts. And then our group that we're talking about today is providing a new perspective on the way of doing things, which is really having a dramatic impact on the industry. And with that, Alex, you talked a little bit about maybe some of the things that you've started to see change. How do you think the industry will change over the next, say, 5 to 10 years in the efforts that you're making?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm still, early in my career here in waste, but hopefully it'll be a long career. But even over the last several years, I've started to see some changes and truly do believe there'll be even more changes coming in the near to medium and long term. I think one of the biggest changes and most exciting changes that I'm starting to see in the space is, at least with food waste, there's this growing recognition that food waste is a major contributor to climate change. And so I think that has major implications to the commitments that food businesses are making, that the actions that investors are taking, the policies that are being developed by our government and our officials there. And for those of you who kind of work in the space, you'll be quite familiar with the Project Drawdown report that came out this year that really quantifies food waste as the #1 solution to climate change. So it's really putting food waste on the map in that area of focus, which I think will bring all new players into the space. So I'm really excited to see where that goes. And then, of course, like we can't talk about the future of this industry without referencing COVID, I would say. And I'd be interested to see what Josh and Turner have to say about that too. But, particularly with our work, what we're thinking about there is that we need to be, of course, handling the, major pressing challenges of the day. And in our world, that's how can we recover as much food, otherwise wasted food as possible, and make sure that's getting to people in need where possible. But we also need to be turning our attention a bit towards how do we build a more resilient food system, because we know that things like this are going to come up in the future. The challenges of our food system existed before COVID. They will exist after COVID. But we need to be thinking more collectively, not individualistically, as I think we're seeing with the pandemic. That's not really helping us to solve this challenge. So I'm hopeful over the next several years. A couple of really tangible things I'd like to see change. One is just a connection of all of these disparate data sources that are out there right now that I think if brought together and were made to be more real time would really change the industry for the better. Let's talk about how much food waste is happening, but up to the minute, what does it look like? What type, how much, what does it need to be able to transport it? Does it need cold storage? That way we can ensure that it's being used to the best that it can be. Additionally, I would say I hope there's some more mapping of important infrastructure that we're able to do across the food system, because then we can make those smarter decisions about how to utilize existing capacity, but then also where new investments need to go to utilize that food even better. And then to Turner's point, our organization at ReFed, we've done a lot over the past couple of years around food rescue and hunger relief. And I think it is incredibly important that as we look towards building a more resilient food system, that we're really focused on putting these food insecure individuals at the center of the model, forming a human-centered design approach to getting that food to them. Because right now it's a system that considers them beneficiaries of grateful donors. And I just don't think that is the most dignified, convenient, and efficient way to be working that system. So.
Okay. Turner, do you have any thoughts on some of the comments Alex shared?
I of course agree with everything that Alex says. You can't improve what you don't measure. So that was one thing that really came out of what you said, Alex. When I started in this world 10 years ago, looking into food rescue and food waste, it's really, like you said, it's been since about 10 years ago or so that this roller coaster and growth of food waste as an environmental solution and as a movement has really kind of ramped up. And back then, people weren't even measuring their food waste. Now they are. And so how do we put that data into play to help reduce the problem? So I'm really excited about some of the work that ReFed is doing, and we at Upcycled Food Association are really excited to contribute to that in productive ways to, get past the point where we're measuring and being more proactive.
Okay, awesome. Josh, we're talking a little bit about food waste here with Alex and Turner. How is it impacting your role in the public sector role for waste management and the discussion from municipalities, residents, et cetera? What does that topic look like for you?
It's exciting times. California is typically the leader in waste and recycling efforts, and the state is definitely championing getting the organics out of landfills and into much more productive uses. Certainly, if there's an opportunity to recover the food before it goes to waste, that is job number one. So I'm working with a lot of communities to strengthen their ties to their local food banks and shelters and soup kitchen programs, because really that is the number one way to reduce food waste overall. We're also working on designing those programs that make best use of the organics that we have for either composting or energy production. And it's definitely a complex situation in the fact that the market is slowly responding. So we've got a lot more material than we have capacity for right now, but we're finally starting to see the shift. And I think you're going to see some really amazing things come out of California in the next couple of years with regards to curbing food waste.
Okay. Well, thank you. Josh, to stick with you for a minute here, technology is something that is ever changing at a rapid pace. How do you think technology is changing the industry, and what are some of the types of technologies that you see or you'd like to see in the future?
Certainly. Waste management is been making huge strides in technology investments, so we're getting to see firsthand the tools of the trade. I think early on, the technology was really supplemental to the industry, right? It was how we managed our billing or our customer data, to where we are today, where it's really the backbone of how most industry companies operate. Whether you're in the hauling space or processor or facility operator, or the many supportive companies that make the world go round in the waste and recycling industry, technology really is forefront in terms of what we're doing. I can tell you that at Waste Management that we're not only comping our competition within the industry, but we're comping the best of the best, the Googles, the Apples of the world, for how can we do a better job of using technology to provide safe, reliable service to our customer. I can tell you that the big thing for us and I'm sure that this is something that's rolling out really industry-wide, is the use of GPS and cameras to basically capture every service that we provide every single day. And ultimately, I think that that's where the industry is going. Amazon really revolutionized how people track their goods that they purchase. And I think in the same way, there is going to be a shift in our industry from the collection side in terms of being able to demonstrate without a doubt that we've provided that safe, reliable service, because you're going to get a service confirmation, or you'll be able to get a service time window, because the data is just that good in terms of what we can do today with both GPS and cameras.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Josh. Alex, you talked about a need for data in your space. When you think about technology over the next several years, what are some things that you would like to see that maybe would help provide some of that data? What are things that would be helpful for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a lot of what we think about at Refed, which is, we try to be this one-stop shop data center for everyone to come to understand what the size of the problem is, but also what are the most viable, scalable solutions to solving this problem of food waste. And in order to do that analysis, you need data coming in, right? So what are the economics of the various solutions? What's the ROI there, the economic impact, et cetera? So we think a lot about that. The solution providers that we track in this space have a lot to contribute, as well as the food businesses who are the ones that are actually adopting the solutions and thinking about, is this an actual good investment for us? Is this really giving us the information that we need? And hopefully going forward, there will be this coalition of solution providers and food businesses that really want to pull back the curtain a little bit, anonymized, of course, not attributable data, but that data to be speaking to each other so that we can start to understand what those analyses and economics look like. But very specifically on like a technology front around data, some food waste solutions that I'll mention, just high level, to Turner's point around like tracking and analytics. So absolutely more businesses are tracking and measuring their food waste. But there are some innovators in the space that are helping businesses do that. Namely, I'll say an organization called LeanPath, another one called Wasteless that is doing that as well. So technologies like that are in the startup space. They're getting venture capital money, and really working with big names like IKEA and others to help them do some of that data tracking and measurement. And then beyond that, I'll just say, given, again, kind of the onset of COVID here, another technology and data space that I think is very interesting would be like online sales platforms. So the industry, historically is a lot of pen and paper. It's a lot of phone calls. Behavior change is a very hard thing to make happen. But as we all move to kind of this digital economy, more online sales and platforms that allow for the transfer of food, I think that data collection and utilization will probably contribute as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you mentioned COVID. We could probably do an entire set just on COVID. here related with our group. But let's shift gears to that for a minute. And Turner, let's come to you. Regarding COVID, I guess, how has that impacted your work? And maybe what are some best practices that you've learned about or take in hopefully coming out of COVID?
So my favorite thing that I've heard about COVID analysis over the last few months is that it just accelerated 10 years from now until today. So I love thinking about it as a way of like just accelerating technology, accelerating our solutions. And, you know, it's about bringing us into the future. Like I said, when I started in this work in the food rescue space, I was literally as an 18-year-old, getting on my bike and going to grocery stores to pick up the food that they had that they were going to throw out and delivering it to shelters. Pretty low barrier to entry. If you can participate in the single greatest solution to climate change on your bike as an 18-year-old, that's a pretty potent solution. That's the low-hanging fruit where we were at. And now we're kind of getting past that in the food waste movement. The low-hanging fruit is no longer low-hanging. We have to reach a little bit higher if we're going to come up with sort of the next generation of solutions. And so that's why the work that Alex is doing is so important, of like providing the intel that we need to kind of get there. But so what does that look like as COVID brought us 10 years into the future? What is 10 years down the line in the food waste movement? And I think it's, filling in the gaps. Since the low-hanging fruit is no longer there, this like obvious solutions, we have to be a little bit more creative and think into, what are the types of food that are going to waste? What are the things that we just weren't even thinking about before, in terms of on-farm food loss and byproducts, and recognizing that all of this food has tremendous value. $1 trillion, more or less, of food goes to waste every year. Let's capitalize on that, frankly. Let's capitalize on that for the sake of the food rescue organizations, the people on their bikes and in their volunteers' cars picking up food to better fund those operations, but then also create a really strong financial incentive for businesses to reduce their byproducts by realizing the true value therein. We have a saying in the upcycled world: the wasters of today are the ingredient suppliers of tomorrow. And so I guess, Zach, that means the haulers of today are the distributors of tomorrow. I don't know, but that's, it's really all about what's happening tomorrow. In 10 years from now, it's better assigning, better understanding, better realizing and elevating what's currently going to waste to its real value.
Got it. Okay. Josh, how has COVID impacted your work at Waste Management?
To answer your question, it's certainly something that has caused our entire company to really rethink its approach to safety. I mean, safety is really job number one here at Waste Management, and typically we're thinking about how do we protect our employees and our customers from the physical things, right? The vehicles, our heavy equipment, materials. But COVID is really brought in this whole new layer of this, invisible threat. And so from that standpoint, that remote working has become a very large component. So people like myself and our entire customer service team is all transitioned to a work from home situation. And then for those members of our team that basically have to show up to work every day, because that's how the job gets done, coming up with those protocols that ensure that they're protecting themselves and the team that they work with. So, it really has redefined what safety means in terms of the industry. And certainly from that standpoint, I think that COVID has been a huge learning opportunity for everybody, just to go back and rethink about your processes. And it's something that probably is going to help us all in the end. So, it's been a challenge, but we're up to it.
Yeah. Okay. And Josh, to your point of safety, Alex, in talking about COVID impacting safety in maybe your business or line of work, any thoughts you have on what's happened there?
Yeah, I mean, Refed itself, we kind of sit at a systems level and kind of look at all of the other players that are really on the front line. So Josh and his team that are actually doing the work, Turner, all of his members that are actually turning that food waste into value-added products. And then, of course, there are all of these food recovery organizations and hunger relief organizations that we also kind of monitor in the space. I will say, particularly in that space, food safety, proper PPE has really become an important factor to making sure that food that is still edible can be provided to people in need. But, how really COVID has affected our work at Refed is, going back to the data component to all of this, at the beginning of the year, Refed was really focused on working on what we're calling our insights engine. So this is that living, breathing data center that we're going to be launching in November, which is a generational leap from this roadmap we put out back in 2016. And so that was going to be heads down working on that, over the course of the year. And when COVID hit, and we were looking at kind of our constituencies and all the stakeholders across the food system, something that we started to realize is that one of our main objectives, which was to catalyze more investment and smart investment into the space where it's needed, it wasn't happening as fast as was needed. So we were trying to do one-on-one matchmaking to bring in money to the space to support organizations that needed it most. And ultimately, what we ended up deciding and doing alongside continuing kind of our standard work that we had planned for the year is we launched a COVID-19 Food Waste Solutions Fund. So we kind of ideated on this, and over the course of a 2-week period, brought in our first dollars into the fund. And really the point of it was just to be a one-stop rapid response vehicle to gather a whole group of donors and allow them to use Refed and our expertise to push out money to frontline organizations that were fighting food waste and hunger relief. So, you got to be kind of nimble in this environment. It really demonstrated to us at Refed that it's really important to understand your expertise, your skill set, and where you can really add the most value. And to the extent you have that capacity to kind of adjust and adapt where needed, it allowed us to, right now, I'm happy to say we've raised over $3.6 million for the fund. And we've given that all out to more than 36 organizations. So, it's changed our work very significantly. I had no idea we were going to do that at the beginning of the year, but I'm happy, we had the expertise and the resourcing to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm not as familiar with the food waste space as you and Alex or you and Turner are, but you certainly just see lines at food banks, and given the current state of the economy, just a challenging situation altogether. It was already a challenge, but just, I think, Turner, you said it's pushed it forward and accelerated it even more. That's created this challenge. So the work you guys are doing is fantastic. So we certainly appreciate the effort that you guys are putting in there. I guess, Alex, to kind of stay with you here, what are some of maybe just the biggest opportunities, if you just had to highlight a couple specific to the industry that you serve?
Yeah, where do I start? I think the biggest opportunity that we need to capitalize on probably is that I've heard individuals say, that the food waste space in particular is, where the clean energy sector was about 15, 20 years ago. And so how can we really start to focus all of the passionate individuals and energy from food businesses and government agencies and solution providers and capital providers towards, the highest and best use of their time as well as their money. Because what we're finding is that in order to scale food waste solutions, it's going to take billions of dollars of financing across public, private, and philanthropic capital sources. So we really need to be thinking about how do we, keep this space sexy, really demonstrate that there is value to be had and returns to be had in this space, not just economic, like I said, but social and environmental. I think besides that, there's a real opportunity for pre-competitive collaboration in this space. So, sometimes I hear conversations around how, well, food waste prevention is contrary to food waste recovery, because if you prevent it all, you're not going to have food to recover. And I just think, and then that says nothing about the recycling space, right? So all three of us on the line, I think we'd probably all agree that we're more related to each other than not, and we really need to be thinking pre-competitively about how to just deal with the food system and use the food for its highest and best use. No passing judgment on where it needs to go in the hierarchy, but just making sure that it goes to that highest and best use. But that will take coordination.
Yeah, makes total sense, really, to create the, for the lack of a better term, the ideal kind of supply chain or food chain, and then figure out everybody's responsibilities kind of within that. Turner, any additional commentary to Alex's points?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it is a supply chain. It's absolutely a supply chain, and that we're trying to optimize here. And the end of the supply chain is the consumer. That is sort of the one space, I think, where the biggest opportunity is that, so far there has been so much philanthropic support of reduction of food waste, and that's so important because there's just some models that are super effective at producing a really high social or environmental return on investment. And the way that we support that and produce those outcomes is through philanthropic dollars. And then there's other types, sources of food, really high value, that have the opportunity to produce a financial return on investment. For those ones, let's engage with the consumer in a new way to put them in the driver's seat to the solution. Food waste is this magical place that everyone agrees is really important. 95, one of our associate members, Matson, product developer out of California, did a study last year. They found 95% of people want to reduce food waste. That's incredible. Those are, first of all, who are the 5%? Who are those people? Those monsters. But really, the 95%, the vast majority of people really care about this issue, and it also happens to be the most effective. Come on, that's something that should really resonate within consumers. Let's get them to fund it. The masses, if this is something that 95% of people agree on, then 95% of people should be putting their money into creating the solution. Well, the problem is right now, they don't have the opportunity to put their money into this solution necessarily. They can make donations to the nonprofit organizations that are in in Refed's Insights engine. They can choose to do business with one hauler over another that has better practices. But let's give them the opportunity to align their food purchases with their values, and that's really what increasing access and demand for upcycled food is all about.
Got it. Okay. Well, Turner, to stay with you for a second, what do you think is the biggest misconception about what you do when maybe you talk to someone that's not in the space?
I think the biggest misconception is sort of the general tendency that people have to call waste, right? And it's no fault of anyone's, because this industry and the lexicon that we use predates all of us. And that's what I'm really excited to be a part of changing. And I think everyone on this call agrees that we have to kind of redefine things. It's because it's not waste. It's a misnomer. And so how can we use our collective genius and the different people that we're engaging with to not redefine, properly define waste? And so the biggest, in some ways, of course, the biggest misconception is the biggest opportunity, because I think when you have that paradigm shift and you get people to stop thinking about waste as worthless and start thinking about it as a big opportunity, because it's like Alex said, it's the fact that it's going to waste right now but has tremendous value shows you that there probably is less competition. And so in terms of young people, entrepreneurs who want to make a lot of money and do something really great for the environment, this is a place where you can be a vanguard of something totally new and super impactful.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Turner. One of the goals, I'd say, of today is highlighting some of the great work that you guys are doing within the industry, because the waste space gets this reputation, and it can create challenges for companies to recruit young, talented folks out of school, because it does have this misnomer. Certainly didn't graduate college personally for me and say, I want to work in the waste space. I didn't even know anything about it. I just, thought the trash fairy picked up the items, every week. So I think you bring up a great point, and that's part of today's discussion, is just highlighting all of these things that impact this great big supply chain that we're working in. I think to that point, Josh, what advice would you give someone that's interested in having a career in our industry?
Yeah, certainly. I think there's really three things that I'd love to highlight. The first being is, like you mentioned, you don't have to be an expert to get started. The waste and recycling industry has got a lot of opportunity out there, and I think if you're motivated and willing to learn, that really the opportunities are endless. The second thing I think is important to mention is that whatever your education or your skill set, the industry probably needs you. So we're at a point, kind of what we talked about earlier, with the fact that engineers and programmers are as essential as drivers and mechanics. That it really is a pretty diverse industry in terms of companies and what they do, and so really is a lot of great opportunities for those folks that maybe don't think, I don't have the skill set for the industry. Believe me, you probably do. The last thing I would probably mention is that the industry has really, and it's evolving quickly, and that what I see is companies have really shifted into gear of hiring the best of the best. That's regardless of your background, who you are. That if you are the best person for that job, that's who they're looking for. And one of the great parts about that is that you end up with this great diversity of backgrounds and mindsets and ideas. And to your point at the start of the call, talking about FILA, I am constantly amazed at the group when it comes together. Just the breadth of the diversity and the different backgrounds and the different companies and the different ideas, and really does speak to where the industry is headed. And so, like I said, I think the opportunities are really endless for someone who's getting ready to jump in.
Yeah, agreed. Turner, let me come back to you for one quick second. You've had obviously a passion for your business and for food, since a very young age. What advice would you give someone that's maybe interested in having a career in this space?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Josh said resonates. Like, start where you're at. In full transparency, the way that I got involved in this industry is taking an internship in undergrad, unpaid internship, to do whatever they needed me to do, which a lot of the time was, like I said, getting on my bike literally and schlepping food around. And I think that is an important thing to keep in mind of, like, yeah, this space is ripe for transformation. And therefore there's no real clear corporate ladder that you're just going to march your way up as a recent grad or as a person trying to get into this industry regardless. And therefore just to kind of be honest with yourself about where you're at, and that is the perfect place to start. Totally acceptable, perfect place to start wherever you're at.
Awesome. And Alex, as you were making that decision at that pivotal moment in your career, what's one thing you wish you would have known about the space before making that change?
Yeah, maybe the question is meant to kind of be a cautionary tale of things that I wish I'd known. I'm not sure that I have too much of a cautionary tale, but just the one thing that really comes to mind, maybe there'll be a couple things, but the one thing that really comes to mind to me, at least when we're talking about food waste or otherwise wasted food, or sparks, as Thomas McQuillan will call it at Baldor, or surplus food, which, Turner, I love that you kind of brought up the comment about just changing the way we talk about and use the language in this space. So if anybody has a great solution for that, we at ReFed continue to look for it. So just want to call that out. But, the thing that I've started to realize is that working in this industry, at least to me, is a never-ending learning journey. And there are so many players involved because it really is this food system. It's a food chain. We're talking about, from farm all the way down to consumers. There's a lot of nuances all along that value chain. And so for me, I guess I didn't think that the industry wouldn't have something to teach me, but I am realizing quite quickly that I'm not sure I will ever have learned all of it. And at least to me, that's very interesting. I feel it will keep me engaged in the space. So that's something I kind of wish I'd known at the front end, but what would I have done differently? I'm not quite sure. But the other thing I'll just mention is, at least particular to this space, is that it's a little bit more challenging because there's no one specific owner often of the problem of waste. So particularly when we're talking about food waste, I will say, and maybe that spans for other waste channels, but within a food business, it's not often on someone's P&L to reduce the food waste. It's not on their final year-end review. How much food waste did you cut for the organization? So you're often having to think about solutions that go cross-function, or that are building coalitions or working with the top to get buy-in down below. That can often present a challenge, but also an opportunity, I think, there. So as long as you're a person that, likes to build coalition, likes, action and solving challenges, and then you really are not trying to ever stop learning, I think this is the industry for you. Awesome.
Well, I think, what's been great about this session that we've had today is that we've talked about food waste, which there's such a huge challenge, but such a huge opportunity to impact people, impact community. And I hope that this platform continues to get the word out about the challenge that's out there, to your point, and bring some attention to it, Alex. And, I thank you guys for the time today, and think about this as such a great opportunity for folks to have a long-standing career, an impact on community, the environment. And you don't have to make that decision that Alex talked about at the beginning, because you can absolutely do both within this space. Before we wrap up, are there any closing comments that anyone would like to make that maybe didn't get to make throughout the discussion today? We're good?
No, thanks, Zach.
Yeah.
Great job. Thanks for.
The only thing I can say is that if I known the industry was going to be as exciting and as challenging as it is, I would have started sooner. I've had a blast.
That's actually one of the things I was going to say, Josh, is like the one thing I wish I'd known is that this industry existed, to the point earlier. I didn't even know that there was a waste industry. I just thought my stuff went somewhere and someone dealt with it and it wasn't even a thing, so that's a great point, Josh.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, thank you guys for participating today. It was a great panel. Appreciate everyone for attending virtually here. There will be a short survey following the session. Appreciate your feedback. And then mark your calendar for Waste Expo 2021. That is slated for in-person, April 26th through 29th in Las Vegas of next year. Stay well and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.